The following program is a production of Pioneer Public Television.
In this episode of Postcards,
no matter what the style of quilt is, how elaborate or difficult it is, it'll be special forever to whoever gets that quilt.
We're here in New Ulm at the Minnesota Music Hall of Fame Museum. It's a wonderful museum to see with all the different artifacts.
What I love about Touch the Skies history and evolution is the coming together with groups that we tend to think don't work together well.
This program on Pioneer Public Television is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4, 2008. Additional support provided by Mark and Margaret Yekel Julien in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHillFarm.org. The Arrowwood Resort and Conference Center, your ideal choice for Minnesota resorts offering luxury townhomes, 18 holes of golf, Darling Reflection Spa, Big Splash Water Park, and much more. Alexandria, Minnesota, a relaxing vacation or great location for an event. Explore alex.com. Easy to get to, hard to leave.
Hi, I'm Shar Jurgensen, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to show you how I made my Civil War quilt sampler. I grew up in the atmosphere of quilting. My mom belonged to a quilting guild. In fact, the quilting guild is still going. It's been some 60 years that they have met. And so we'd come off the school bus and come home, and all the ladies would be sitting around the quilting frame. And I guess that's how I kind of got interested in quilting, watching them making quilts. My grandma, my great-grandma, and my mom, they all were quilters as well. Actually, it was during wheat harvest when I took the class, and you could go into town early in the morning and nobody knew that you'd left the farm because the combines didn't go till later in the afternoon. And by the end of harvest, I had finished my first trip around the world quilt. And then from that, I moved on into Lone Stars, and I started teaching at community ed in the high schools. After so long, I decided I'd had enough of Lone Stars and Trip Around the Worlds, so I wanted to make a double wedding ring quilt, which is a quilt that intimidates everybody, all quilt makers. I bought a couple of patterns and didn't get them to work, so I decided I'm going to create my own pattern. Had it drafted, and then bought some acrylic plastic and had them cut with a meat saw, if you can imagine. It wasn't as accurate as the ones we have today, but the first pattern was very, very popular. This particular set of templates was cut by Lorne Gressett from out in Lacuparo. He used a meat saw to cut those templates, and he did a very, very good job. Very accurate, but today now our templates are cut with a laser cutter, so they've changed a lot. The one thing that was a problem with this set was that this particular piece in here was so terribly long and it was hard to package. This is my very first book. This is when I was still Shar's Prairie Patchwork. The logo is very, I don't know how to explain it. I just did it with pencil the day I brought the book to get printed. got the windmill and the quilt hanging on the clothesline. And my graphics are very, very, well, I took photographs, and that's how I did the graphics in this very first book. As you can see, I had a long ways to go to come out with a much better book. But you wouldn't believe how popular this pattern was and how many we actually sold. And that was the very first pattern that I took with me to Houston the very first time I went to the International Quilt Show. The way I cut the double wedding ring with speed using the acrylic templates, that's what gave me my start. And I wished everything I did in life was as good as that, because it has really been a nice trip for me. I was starting to get exhausted from all the traveling, and so then I decided, well, maybe I should start a TV show and just do it one time, one series, and then I'm done. I don't have to do anymore. And what I didn't realize when I did that was that that would just get to be a bigger snowball. Quilting from the Heartland name hasn't always been the name. It started out with Char's Prairie Patchwork in the beginning. Then I went on with a new name called Quick Strip because I was quickly cutting the fabric and stripping it. So we've had a few different name changes, but now we've stuck with that for many, many years. One thing led to another. So then you do one series and you got to write books, and then you got to do another series, and it was a very, very popular show for me. I think I did 13 different productions for PBS. My very first one, however, was done in Appleton. That's where I got my start. I never dreamed that I would be on such a journey as this. When I started with the double wedding ring, there was not a business plan. I did not plan to go down this path. I was just playing with quilting, wanting to satisfy my own desire to make a double wedding ring quilt. It just happened that I happened to come across something that was so popular and easy for the ladies to do. The speed of cutting and the ease of putting it together. I just feel really blessed that that happened. It was a real gift that I was given. So it's been a fun journey. Not to say that there hasn't been a lot of hard work with it, but it has been a lot of fun. If sewing is something that you like to do, certainly quilting is a way of leaving something for your family to treasure forever. Garments are wonderful, but to leave a quilt or an heirloom for your family is really a treasure for them to have forever. No matter what the style of quilt is, how elaborate or difficult it is, it'll be special forever to whoever gets that quilt. I don't know, I love it as much today as I did the day I started. It's an addiction. It's a true addiction. So, it's fun.
We're here in New Ulm at the Minnesota Music Hall of Fame Museum. We moved in 10 years after we were initiated as an organization. This place houses all the artifacts of the majority of a lot of our inductees. It's a wonderful museum to see with all the different artifacts. We had a festival back in many years ago. It was called Polka Days. Well, there was bands all over on street corners, but you had to be from New Ulm to play. In their high schools, a lot of your band directors played polka music as part of their repertoire. And a lot of the band directors were band leaders. Guy Leo, but he was in polka music. He was in Big Band Modern. He was the school teacher, and he was also a band leader. There was a lot of musicians out of this town. It seemed like if your grandfather played, oh, you got to play an instrument. Fez Fritchie and the Goostown Band, and then there was Whoopi John Wilford Band. They had a large band. I want to say, if I'd have to guess, it was at least 12, 13, 14 musicians. You know, a full band of trumpets, clarinets, etc. And they were very busy. They played all over for all the festivals, all the ballrooms. There were so many ballrooms in the state of Minnesota. It was unbelievable. I want to say we estimated at one time there were well over 200 ballrooms in the state of Minnesota. That's just at a low figure. The Hengel Concertina started actually not in town here. It was from, Waseca, that's right. This is where Christy Hengel was from, Waseca, and that's where he started building the concertina. Then he moved to New Ulm, maybe about between 3 and 5 years from the time he started there, and he continued his building here.
As I grew up, my family was involved in music, and my parents loved the old-time music, the polkas, and there were a lot of concertina players around back in those days, as there are today, but they're just not as well known. They kind of creep out of the woodwork when you have a fundraiser and they have a concertina jamboree. They come in droves. But there were a lot of old-time dances, and my father played in an old-time band, and we'd go along as children to the dance. And I became interested in learning the concertina because it was a popular instrument at that time. It is a little more difficult to learn than an accordion, a piano accordion, because when you push one button and pull, you get two different notes. As I got older and got a little more at ease with the concertina and learn more tunes, my dad always said to me, if you get good enough, I'll get you a Hengel concertina. This is the concertina that Christy made for me in 1970. I was just about to begin playing with the Ivan Kale Band from Norwood, Minnesota, and Christy wanted me to have my concertina for my first job, so he worked pretty steadily for 2 weeks trying to get it done, and I did get it in time for my first job with Ivan Kale Band. Having Christy in New Ulm was interesting. He drew a lot of people to this town. Just people would come and spend a day because Christy would talk and talk and talk, and he knew a lot of band people. He knew a lot of musicians. You had a hard time getting away from Christy when you went to visit him, but he did bring a lot of people into New Ulm. The Hengel concertina is, it is the Rolls-Royce, I feel, of the concertinas. There are a lot of band members that played and still do play Hengel concertinas. They're lightweight, they're lighter weight than a lot of concertinas. The action, the fingers, the fastness of playing, the staccato is there, and the tone is wonderful. Christy Hengel hand-filed each reed in the concertina and tuned it by ear, and he was fabulous at doing that. They would come from California, Texas, all over the United States to buy them. And to this day, if there's a Hengel concertina for sale, It is not for sale for very long because somebody will just jump on it. You might find a few used ones today, but the price is a lot higher than the original price. When I bought this in 1970, it cost $800. And today, I probably would not take any less than $12,000 for it because you can't get them anymore, not the ones that are made by Christy Hengel. You can play the concertina, and you've got your bass with it and your melody. You've got the harmony notes with it. You can sit and play it all by yourself, and you don't need another instrument. The concertina you can play by yourself, and it works pretty well.
Well, I've spent a lot of time in my life traveling around the world and lived in some spectacular places, but I always seem to come back to the prairie, like a salmon comes back to where it was born in a particular stream after traveling thousands of miles around the ocean. In fact, I was born in this little farm just a mile away, right over here, and I find it interesting that this happened to be that this 1,000-acre prairie called Touch the Sky Prairie National Wildlife Refuge happens to have a life of its own, and it's kind of based upon passion, some amount of luck, and a mood right now amongst the public that we want to start reclaiming some of the land that we've plowed and turned into cropland, to put some of it back into the native landscape that was here for 10,000 years. The reason this particular prairie is significant is it was never plowed because of boulders like this. It's quite impractical to try to remove the boulders, and you certainly can't plow around them. So we're sitting up in a fairly high rise. You can see 3 states from here: South Dakota, Iowa, and then of course Minnesota here. And it's quite a vista. That's why we call it Touch the Sky Prairie. A little bit of a reference to the indigenous people that lived here, the Native Americans that were here clearly before us. There's lots of evidence here on the prairie. Just yesterday, coincidentally, amazing coincidence, that I was stumbling along this hilltop here on Touch the Sky, and I came across something that I would call a dolmen. It's a very common thing in Europe, where a huge boulder was slid and structured in a way for worship, for spiritual reasons, as a landmark. I tend to think it's probably for spiritual reasons, but it's clearly, to me, man-made. I know a farmer didn't do it in his pastime. I think that it was probably done by Native Americans for some kind of significance, and it seems like it's almost a little altar right here. But you can see this rock is balancing on a pedestal that the glaciers could have never structured like this, and certainly there was no water flowing up this high. So just yesterday, this needs to be investigated and studied. But in my mind, it's a classic dolmen. And nobody really knows what dolmens were for. Or like Stonehenge. We know there was some kind of a major ritualistic happening or spiritual reason, but it's pure conjecture, except to me it's clear it was made by the hand of man. The circumstances were such that an official with Fish and Wildlife Service came to my gallery, the Brandenburg Gallery in Laverne, and just happened to walk in and notice that there was a prairie theme to the photographs, and he got in touch with me, and I had a vision for this particular place, which was owned by someone else at the time, a classmate of mine. I was investigating possibly buying it just for me, just to have a prairie. And one thing led to another, and I brought a gentleman by the name of Ron Cole out from Fish and Wildlife Service. He was the regional director of acquiring a series of prairies called the Northern Tallgrass Wildlife Refuge System. And it ranged from roughly the Canadian border all the way down to Iowa. And he was just getting started looking at property and looking for possibilities. And he came to Laverne, went in the gallery, we met, I brought him out here, and he was standing on a boulder, similar to this the day we brought him out. And I hope he's not embarrassed for me saying this, but he actually had tears going down his cheek. Now, to see a government guy with his uniform on, with tears coming down, he looked at this and he said, "This is a natural." And so a partnership with the Brandenburg Prairie Foundation and the Fish and Wildlife Service, Chamber of Commerce in Laverne, who runs my gallery, the local people, generous individuals. We have 1,000 acres of tall grass prairie with a lot of beautiful memories have been accumulated for me, especially. So each year it gets more and more exciting. This year has got the best grass display that I've ever seen. Big blue stem, little blue stem, cord grass, Indian grass, the great prairie grasses that were here long before our ancestors came from Europe and plowed it up. And it's just like an island. You can see all around us is lower than we are. So I expect the bison came up here a lot to get away from insects in the summer, and it's cool in the wind. You can see where they've rubbed against the rocks and made this extremely hard Sioux quartzite shine like a mirror. Then you can see where the Native Americans would come by later and chip off some of it to use as a tool. That's quite evident all through the prairie here. I think it's probably the best place I know of in southwest Minnesota where you can actually see evidence of Native Americans besides Jeffers petroglyphs, which are up here about 40, 50 miles with the designs that they'd carved in the rock. So it's, I live in the deep forest, way up in the Canadian border. That's my main home, the land of the wolf and the canoe and the deep, dark forest. But I come down here and feel something that I don't feel almost anywhere else in the world. It could be the fact that I was born here, and it's just my landscape of my childhood and my memory. It could be the open space. It could be the unlimited sense of you can really feel something up here. When I was a journalist, there were two subjects that just kept coming at me. One was prairie, and one was wolves. One was the landscape, the most persecuted, least understood landscape in North America. The prairie was the largest expanse of an ecosystem in America. People don't think, they think maybe it's mountains or forests or seacoast, but the prairie covered the biggest area. But it's been the most persecuted. It's been pretty much plowed up and not well understood. Most of it was destroyed and most of it disappeared before it was even really studied. They shot, of the millions and millions of buffalo in these huge herds, they shot them down to and killed them down to, I think, about 1,000 animals or less than 1,000 animals. Almost became extinct. And the same thing with the prairie grasses. And we don't really know. This wasn't really documented scientifically. We don't know exactly what it was like here. We kind of think we know a lot of it, but imagine there's some species that are extinct. So I was attracted to the prairie to tell the story of the prairie as a journalist. Words and pictures. And the wolf, the most persecuted animal in the world, I think. That's the subject I've spent my life. My first National Geographic story was prairie, tallgrass prairie. I've done wolf stories for National Geographic, movies. I've had a lucky life. I've had a magic carpet ride. I've had so much that I actually can't quite absorb it, and I think it's too much. I need to become a little more humble and settle down a little more, and I'm very intrigued by spending more time here on the prairie, back where I came from. I feel a little more grounded here. What I love about Touch the Sky's history and evolution is the coming together with groups that we tend to think don't work together well. And it really thrills me, besides the obvious, the nature. That's the obvious to me. The prairie grasses and the wild expanse where you can go for a long walk without running across a road or a sidewalk or something from a town. But to see the fruits of a bunch of people getting together with good intentions, it shows me that there's hope. The teaching moment, rather than boast about it. Oh, we've saved 1,000 acres. Yes, that's nice. But the experience and the lesson that went with it and how it can be duplicated, spreading that word, is really what interests me. Leave a little behind. Leave something behind. That's what Touch the Sky is about for me. I'll be long forgotten. 100 years from now, 200 years from now, Touch the Sky will still be here. Photographs will be long forgotten, and that makes me very happy. We all want to leave something behind, some kind of an example of what we believed in or felt, and if we can. And I didn't do this alone, by any stretch.
This program on Pioneer Public Television is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. Additional support provided by Mark and Margaret Yackel-Julien in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHillFarm.org. The Arrowwood Resort and Conference Center, your ideal choice for Minnesota resorts offering luxury townhomes, 18 holes of golf, Darling Reflection Spa, Big Splash Water Park, and much more. Alexandria, Minnesota, a relaxing vacation or great location for an event. Explore alex.com. Easy to get to, hard to leave.